Her grandfather survived the hell of the Ardennes thanks to this. And she kept quiet. Until now. Northern Afghanistan, winter. The mountains stood like silent judges, their peaks smothered in ice in suspicion. We were a convoy of 8 vehicles stranded under a shroud of darkness. Engines cut. Radios hissing and broken. The wind scoured the frozen dirt as if searching for the softest among us. We'd stopped because the lead Humvee triggered an old Soviet mine, its front axle bent grotesquely, the blast muffled in the snow. The corporal inside didn't scream. He didn't have time to. Silence followed, the kind that makes the earth itself feel dead. I stayed inside my vehicle, cold breath curling up past my nose. I didn't speak. I didn't offer advice. Not yet. I wasn't paid to know things. Not me, the Instagram soldier. I'd seen their eyes during the last mission brief. Pretty face, quick posts, not much else. Not combat ready. A mannequin dressed in fatigues. But we all stood now in the dark, knowing the map told us nothing about mines laid 30 years before. Each step was a question with no answer. Each breath a borrowed thing. Captain Allen tried the radio again. Static. A useless prayer. I need ideas, he barked, voice raw against the cold. Somebody say something. Nobody moved. Because the next movement could be the last. I swallowed down the tightness in my throat, felt it dissolve into memory, the sound of another winter, another terrain. The old farm in Montana, long before war. Before duty. My grandfather's voice came back, steady as the earth beneath us. The ground will tell you where the evil lives am. Just listen for its heartbeat. He had survived the Battle of the Bulge that way, crawling through Belgian fields wired with mines, feeling his way forward with a sixth sense he called nothing more than respect for the land. His stories of Ardennes came with no medals, just the quiet weight of men remembered and men lost. I never told anyone. Not during basic. Not when they laughed at me in officer training. You gonna divine the path with a stick too, Carter? The humiliation stuck deeper than any scar. So I played along, let them have the jokes. Let them call me the Instagram lieutenant. But now I was watching good men freeze paralyzed, waiting to die stupidly in a field of someone else's forgotten war. Captain Allen dropped to his knees. His voice was thin. Someone, for God's sake, think of something. That was my breaking point. I pushed open the Humvee door and stepped into the cold. I didn't say a word. Didn't ask for permission. I crouched low and pressed my gloved palm to the frozen earth. I closed my eyes. The others watched. Scoffing maybe? Or confused. I didn't care. I wasn't listening to them. I was listening to the dirt, to the bones of the land, to the subtle hush and hum beneath the frost, where life whispers warnings if you have the patience to hear them. And for a moment I wasn't here. I was back on the farm, a little girl with frostbitten fingers pressed to the Montana soil, guided by a grandfather who knew survival wasn't in your rifle, it was in your humility. Lieutenant Carter, a voice rasped behind me. What the hell are you doing? I heard the disbelief, the sneer wrapped in fear. But then I heard another voice, older, grizzled. Sergeant Mills. My God. She's just like her grandfather. Carter of the Ardennes. Silence swallowed us again. But now it was different. They knew the name. The name stirred like wine through dead leaves. Carter of the Ardennes. I didn't look up. I kept my palm pressed to the dirt. Let them remember on their own. Mills stepped forward. His voice quieter now, almost reverent. Her grandfather pulled a platoon out of a minefield in Belgium. No metal detector. No map. Just his hands. No one spoke. Just the wind. And that terrible feeling in our boots that the ground was not ours. I opened my eyes. The frost rimmed my eyelashes, but I felt warmth where my fingers sank just a fraction into the soil. There was a rhythm here. Faint. Subtle. Like breath under skin. I stood slowly, brushing the frost from my knees. I can get us out, I said. But you'll have to step where I step. No exceptions. Captain Allen stared at me hollow-eyed. Whatever contempt he'd had was dead now. Only exhaustion remained. He nodded. Once. I didn't smile. There was nothing to smile about. I turned and placed my foot forward carefully, precisely, the way Grandpa had taught me, heel first, weight tested, listening for that slight change beneath me. Every patch of ground had a story if you knew how to listen. Behind me, boots shuffled. Sergeant Mills was the first to follow, his breath hard and heavy. Then more footsteps, uneasy, cautious. The convoy of men like ghosts trailing the living. We moved slowly. Too slowly. But that was the price of survival. Step by step, I let my body feel the ground. My grandfather called it reading the bones of the earth. Where frost thinned, where the soil crusted unnaturally, where the dead grass stood too stiff, that's where metal teeth waited. We curved around the wreckage of the lead Humvee. The dead corporal inside stared through the cracked glass, frozen in his last breath. I whispered an apology to him, that he couldn't wait for me to remember sooner. Behind me, no one spoke. Only breath and footsteps, spaced carefully. Then a voice, Mills again. Low, almost to himself. Christ, her grandfather did this barefoot in Belgium. She's doing it with ice under her boots. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was back in Montana in the fields where Grandpa made me walk blindfolded, trusting my feet, my hands, my gut. Your eyes lie, Emma, he'd say. But the ground never does. The path wove us through the darkness. The moon was hidden. Stars cold and indifferent. But underfoot I knew the way. By the time we saw the last ridge of dirt that marked the Soviet minefield's edge, the first faint blush of dawn had cracked the horizon. I stopped. Turned. We were clear. Captain Allen fell to his knees, not from a tripwire, but from sheer relief. His hands trembled on the frostbitten dirt. The others sagged. Some collapsed into the snow, gasping. I stood silent, watching them. It was not pride I felt, it was something closer to shame. Because I should have spoken sooner. Mills clapped a hand on my shoulder. That was your gift, he said, breath fogging between us. You should have let us see it before. I tried, I whispered. Once. He nodded, understanding heavier than the frost. We didn't deserve to hear it then. Maybe now we'll listen. The sun peeled away the black mist, revealing the twisted wreckage of the convoy's lead vehicle. The corporal's face, gray and still, caught in the light. We leave no one behind, Mills murmured. We walked back with ropes, boards, anything to spread our weight, to carry the corporal home. When the last man crossed the boundary, a voice crackled through the revived radio. Convoy? Status. Mills grabbed the receiver. His voice was steady. We're out. Lieutenant Carter led us through. There was a long pause on the other end. Repeat. She got us out, Mills said. Step by goddamn step. For the first time, no one corrected him. No one snickered. Weeks later, back at base, they debriefed me. They filmed my explanation. Slow, careful demonstrations of listening to the soil, reading the grass, feeling the vibrations beneath frost. They didn't scoff anymore. They sent a note to my file. Recommended me for a new program, terrain intuition training. I'd lead it. The ones who once laughed sat in the front row. I never mentioned my grandfather's name. Not officially. But Mills did. Word spread. Carter of the Ardennes had a granddaughter. And she'd listened. At the commendation ceremony, the general handed me the medal, heavy in the cold air. Cameras flashed. But the speech, I kept it short. My grandfather told me once, I said, that the earth will always tell you where it is evil. Just be quiet and listen. I looked at the rows of men who had followed me that night. The next time you think someone is too beautiful, too quiet, or too strange for war, remember who led you out of death, step by step. I left the podium without waiting for applause. Outside, the wind was sharp, but I pressed my hand to the ground. Still listening, still learning. I left the ceremony with the medal heavy in my pocket, though I never looked at it again. Awards tarnish quickly when held too long. The only thing that mattered was that we'd made it out, and that I had remembered what I wasn't supposed to forget. Back at the barracks, I sat alone on the edge of my cot, boots still laced tight. The hum of the base moved around me, men shouting drills, helicopters throbbing against the sky, metal clanging. But inside, I was elsewhere, Montana, winter, the farmhouse, the wind whistling under the cracked window frames. And Grandpa at the table, polishing his old boots with hands that looked like they'd been carved from bark. He used to say the earth was a living thing, that if you paid attention, it would forgive your trespass. I remember him saying, Emma, we walk on it like it's dead. But it's not. It remembers every man who steps wrong. I'd hidden that part of me for too long. The world I was raised in didn't fit the world I'd stepped into. No one wanted a soldier who read soil like scripture. They wanted precision, tech, satellites, sensors. But the satellites didn't save us that night. The soil did. I wrote a letter that evening. Not for the army. Not for command. But for my grandfather's grave in Montana. Folded it neatly. A confession. A thank you. A belated apology for being ashamed of what he taught me. I never sent it. There was nowhere to send a letter to the dead. But I kept it folded tight in my breast pocket under the insignia. The new program started slow. The army didn't know what to call it. They tried terrain sensory training. They called me the lead, but it felt more like being a relic hauled out for display. The first class was full of skeptics. Boys with perfect scores in ballistics, top-of-the-line gear, expensive education. They sat with crossed arms, boots shining, waiting to be unimpressed. I stood before them, no slides, no clickers, no data sheets. Just me, a patch of dirt in a training field, and my voice. You've been taught to watch your six, clear your corners, trust your tech, I said. But when the tech fails and the corners disappear in darkness, what are you left with? A few of them glanced at each other. One smirked. You're left with the ground, I continued. And the ground is a liar if you're not listening. They waited for a gimmick, a trick. I gave them none. I just knelt, spread my palm flat, eyes closed. I made them wait with me, the silence long and uncomfortable. I told them to feel the air change when the ground is hollow. To watch the grass lean differently where the soil is disturbed. To smell not just dirt, but rust oil, the tang of things buried wrong. Days passed. Weeks. They began to kneel too. I watched their arrogance bend into curiosity. And slowly into humility. One evening, after a long day on the field, I sat on a log with Sergeant Mills, who'd offered to assist with the courses. He lit a cigarette, the ember a small defiance against the dark. You ever think they'll really believe this stuff? He asked. I shrugged. They don't need to believe in me. Just in the ground under them. He chuckled, then grew quiet. Your grandfather, he said finally. You ever tell him what you became? I shook my head. He died when I was 15. Before I even thought of the army. Mills nodded, exhaling smoke. Then I'll tell you what I think. If he was anything like the stories say, he knew. He knew because you're still listening. The wind rustled through the dry grass around us. I closed my eyes and listened. A rabbit darted somewhere in the brush. The distant hum of trucks on the road beyond base. And beneath it, the low, steady thrum of the earth itself. Months passed. Word spread. Command started sending more soldiers through my course, not just grunts, but officers, ED specialists, pathfinders. People who once thought their gear would outlast instinct. I didn't teach them magic. I taught them remembrance. Of a time before machines told us where to step. Some of them got it. Some didn't. But they all walked away quieter. Captain Allen came by once. He stood in the back, arms crossed, watching. His face was different now, not skeptical, but searching. After the session, he approached me. You know, he said, I told my wife about you. She said it was like something out of folklore. A woman who talks to the dirt. I smiled faintly. It's not talking. It's listening. He looked at me hard for a moment. Then nodded. I never said thank you, he admitted. So, thank you. I didn't reply. We both knew gratitude wasn't what I needed. Just respect. Before he left, he added, you ever think of taking a commission higher up? Get you off this dirt. I shook my head. I'm where I need to be. He left it at that. At night, sometimes I'd walk the perimeter of the base alone. The soil was different here, drier, lighter. But the heartbeat was still there if you paused long enough. One night, I knelt, palms flat, just as my grandfather had shown me. The wind cold on my neck, the stars unfamiliar above foreign soil. And I whispered, I'm not ashamed anymore. I don't know if the earth heard me. But I heard myself. That was enough. One morning before sunrise, the commandant himself came down to the field. Not his aides, not a junior officer sent to observe, but the man himself, for stars polished boots. His face carved by decades of military weather, by wars I wasn't old enough to remember. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. I was leading a group through their final training. A mock field laced with simulated hazards, fake mines, tripwires half buried under dust. The soldiers followed me, their steps careful, their eyes not on me but on the ground. They'd learned to see differently. When we finished, the commandant stepped forward. His hands behind his back, eyes sharp but unreadable. You Carter? He asked. Yes, sir. Walk with me. I followed, our boots crunching lightly over the frost. He didn't speak for a while. Just moved alongside me like he was weighing the land itself. I heard about what happened in the north, he said finally. Heard you got those men out. Heard you lost one too. I said nothing. You know what that makes you? He asked. I waited. Accountable, he answered himself. You carry every man you save, and the ones you can't. I nodded. Yes, sir. We stopped near the outer fence. The sky was softening to pale gray, light spilling slow across the world. What you're teaching, he continued. Some think it's superstition. Others think it's a gift, but I think it's something older. He turned to me, eyes like worn steel. You're teaching them how to remember. We've spent decades trying to outthink the land. Maybe it's time we remembered how to listen to it. I said quietly, "That's all I ever wanted, sir." He regarded me for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. I hesitated, then shook it. His grip was steady, calloused. "We'll keep this program going," he said. "I want your method standardized. I want it in every manual. But most of all, I want it remembered who taught it." I almost told him about my grandfather, about Belgium, about Montana winters, but I kept it in my chest like a coal I wasn't ready to share. "Thank you, sir." He nodded once, then turned back toward the command building. I stood alone until the sun crested fully, turning the frost to light. By that winter, the Army had formalized the program. They called it ground sensory operations, but the soldiers had their own name for it. Carter's compass. I never liked the sound of that. I didn't want my name wrapped around something that didn't belong to me. It belonged to the dirt, to the dead, to the ones who'd learned too late. But it was out of my hands. They asked me to write a manual. I refused. You can't write the feel of the earth into a book. You can only kneel, only listen. So I trained them myself. One night, a young sergeant came to me after class. He looked nervous, shifting on his boots. "Ma'am," he said, "I heard a story about the Ardennes, about a man Carter of the Ardennes. Any relation?" I looked at him, the frost shimmering faintly around us. He was my grandfather. His face lit up like he'd uncovered some hidden lineage, a piece of history. "Damn," he whispered. "So it runs in the family." I shook my head. "No. He taught me. That's all." He was quiet for a moment. "What was he like?" I paused. "He listened better than anyone I've ever known," I said. "To people. To the ground. To the dead." The sergeant nodded, like he understood more than he could say. "Thank you, ma'am, for teaching us." When he walked away, his step softer now, I felt something in my throat. Not pride, not grief. Just gravity. I kept the letter to my grandfather in my pocket for months. Then, one day after training, I walked to the perimeter where the grass stood taller, where fewer boots had tread. I knelt, pressed my palm flat to the dirt, and I buried the letter there. Folded tight, a small paper coffin. I whispered, "I remembered, Grandpa." Then I stood, brushing the soil from my palms, and walked back into the world. I didn't need the letter anymore. I carried the memory in my hands, in the soles of my feet. And under the soil, the earth remembered too. The winter passed, and with it, the men and women who trained under me went their separate ways. Afghanistan, Syria, scattered postings. Some didn't return. Some sent letters or messages. I didn't answer all of them. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew their gratitude wasn't for me. It was for the dirt under their boots. The soil that warned them when satellites couldn't. That whispered of wrongness beneath frozen grass. They were just remembering. One evening, Sergeant Mills brought me a file. He dropped it on my desk, heavy with classified stamps. "What's this?" I asked. "Intel pulled from a Soviet archive," he said. "Maps. Field reports. The minefield we crossed up north?" It wasn't on any of our records, but the Russians knew. I opened the folder. Grainy photos, coordinates, declassified notes. "They called it the blind tomb," Mills said. "Said even their sappers refused to walk it." He paused, then added, "They lost 3 units trying to clear it in '83. I traced the photos, the blackened craters, the half-sunken steel traps. We'd walked through death with only the sound of the earth guiding us. Mills sat across from me, his voice low. "Funny thing, though. They say no one could hear anything in those fields. But one report mentions a man." I looked up. A partisan. Some old farmer who crossed it during the war. They said he walked like he knew where to go. I closed the file slowly. "It's always the farmers," I said. Mills chuckled. "Yeah. The ones who listen." We didn't speak for a while after that. Just sat in the hum of the heater, the chill still wrapped around the building. After Mills left, I sat with the file open on my lap, the weight of it pressing into my legs. I thought of my grandfather. His hands callous from soil, not steel. His voice teaching me patience in a world that rewarded noise. And I thought of the dead men in those Soviet photos. Forgotten soldiers in a forgotten graveyard of mines. The ground kept their stories. All it asked was that we listen. By spring, a journalist arrived on base. Civilian embedded. Wanted to write a feature on Carter's compass, as they called it. I refused interviews, but command insisted. Optics, they said. She was young, sharp-eyed, voice too loud for my taste. We met by the training field. She recorded everything on her tablet, scribbling notes I knew she didn't understand. After an hour, she asked, "So do you think it's a sixth sense? Like a supernatural gift?" I shook my head. "No. It's remembering. That's all." She frowned. "Remembering what?" I gestured to the dirt beneath us. The frost gone now, the soil dark and rich. Remembering that this is older than us. Older than our wars, our flags. The land remembers where men die. You can feel it if you're quiet enough. She didn't write that part down. I knew she wouldn't. Before she left, she asked, "Why did you start listening? What made you trust it?" I thought of that convoy. The corporal's face frozen in glass. The wind over Montana fields. My grandfather's boots scraping the frost. I answered simply, "Because no one else was listening." She nodded as if that was sufficient. But it wasn't. It never is. Months later, a letter arrived from Montana. The VFW hall in Billings had tracked me down. They'd heard about the program, about the Ardennes, about me. Inside the envelope was a small photograph, faded and sun-streaked. My grandfather, young, standing in a muddy Belgian field. His uniform heavy with winter. A faint smile on his face. On the back, someone had written, "Carter of the Ardennes." He brought them home. I held the photo for a long time. The paper soft at the edges, like it might dissolve. I slipped it into my breast pocket next to the folded insignia. Later that night, I walked to the edge of the training field. The moon high. The ground warm under my boots. I knelt, pressed my palm to the dirt, and I whispered, "I brought them home too, Grandpa." The soil didn't answer. It didn't need to, because I could feel it. Alive. Listening. Remembering. Time passed. The Army formalized Carter's compass. Units cycled through, training the old way, no tech, no wires, just earth and instinct. The program spread beyond Afghanistan, beyond deserts and tundra. Even the Marines adopted it, grudging but practical. Word was it saved teams in Burma and Niger and places they didn't put on the maps. I stayed. Quietly. Teaching. Listening. Letting the dirt do most of the talking. But it wasn't the soil that changed things forever. It was a letter. One morning, a civilian courier found me outside the mess. A sealed envelope, plain but official. My name printed in tight, black ink. I opened it under the shade of the barracks steps. The paper was stiff, the message short. Department of Defense Advisory. Return requested. Washington, D.C. Command Review Committee. I read it twice. Didn't say why. Didn't need to. Command wanted to see the woman who knelt in frost and found her way out of death. Mills raised an eyebrow when I told him. "Suit up then," he said. "D.C. S cold, but not like here." I shook my head. "I'm not wearing dress blues." He laughed. "Then wear what got you here." So I did. Fatigues dust-stained. Boots scuffed from fields of listening. The plane to D.C. was sterile. Men in uniforms with too much brass. A stewardess tried to seat me further back, away from the colonels. A general waved her off. "She stays here," he said. "She's Carter." Funny. The name had become something other than mine. We landed under a steel sky. The air smelled of rain and concrete. They took me straight to the Pentagon. Marble floors, bright lights. Places where the dirt had been scrubbed away so thoroughly that people forgot it existed. The review committee was a half-moon of suits and uniforms. Generals, analysts, a woman from DARPA with thin glasses. I stood in my dusty boots before them. A man with a silver star on his collar cleared his throat. "Lieutenant Carter," he said. "You know why you're here?" "No, sir." He smiled faintly. "You're here because your method works. And because we don't understand why." The DARPA woman spoke. "We want to codify your technique. Translate it into data, algorithms, perhaps even AI replication." I said nothing. Another officer chimed in. "With your knowledge, we could create devices to do what you do. Machines that listen to the ground. Sensors that detect what the human ear cannot." I stared at them a moment, then asked, "Why?" They blinked. "Because it would make the method scalable," the DARPA woman said. "Predictable." I shook my head. "You want to mechanize what you refuse to hear." That's not listening. That's replacing. They didn't like that. Another general leaned forward. We're offering you a chance to advance this. To make it permanent. I met his gaze. It already is permanent. The earth isn't going anywhere. They grew quiet. Finally, the silver-starred officer asked, "Then what would you have us do?" I answered simply, "Teach patience. Teach respect. Teach them to kneel." That hung in the air like smoke. The DARPA woman sighed, tapping her pen. "We can't program that." I nodded. "That's why it's worth keeping." The committee ended. They thanked me, sent me away. But as I left, the silver-starred officer called after me. "Carter," he said. "One last thing." I turned. "Your grandfather," he asked. "Is it true? Carter of the Ardennes?" I nodded. He stood quietly, a ghost of something respectful in his eyes. "My father served under him," he said. "Said he trusted that man more than any compass." I held his gaze. "Then your father knew how to listen," I said. And I left. I returned to base the next week. The ground was still there. Still waiting. Training continued. More soldiers came through, and some brought with them not just curiosity but reverence. They knelt quicker now. Palms pressed deeper. Some even closed their eyes. One evening, I stood at the edge of the field, watching a young private move through an exercise. His steps slow, deliberate, reading the dirt. Mills stood beside me, arms crossed. "Funny thing," he muttered. "Every generation forgets until it remembers." I glanced at him. And then they teach it all over again. I kept teaching, kept listening. Years passed. Faces changed. Some of my students became trainers themselves. Then one day I got a message. Handwritten. A tradition that had become rare. It was from a sergeant in a foreign posting. He'd trained under me a year before. "Ma'am, we hit an old field. No maps, no support. My team survived because I remembered what you taught me. Because I listened. We owe you. The earth owes you. With respect. Sergeant D. Herrera." I folded the letter and placed it inside my cot frame beneath my pillow. I didn't need thanks. But sometimes it mattered to know the listening hadn't stopped. Late one night, I returned to the field alone. The wind low, the soil soft with recent rain. I knelt. Pressed my palm flat. Closed my eyes. There beneath the surface, I heard it. Not with ears, but with the bones of me. The heartbeat of the earth. Slow. Steady. Older than war. Older than pride. Older than me. I whispered, "I'm still here." And the ground in its quiet way said, "I know." Years later, when I finally left the service, I went home. Not to a city or a base, but to Montana. To the farm that no longer stood, only its bones left, the crumbling fence posts, the stone well, the scar of the dirt road that led nowhere. I stood there as the wind combed the dry grass, the sky wide and open, just as I remembered. I knelt at the edge of what used to be the field where my grandfather taught me. The soil was brittle, crusted with frost. But beneath it, the heartbeat was still there. Faint but alive. I pressed my hand down, eyes closed. "I'm back," I whispered. And in the hush of that land, I heard memory, not words. Just presence. I planted nothing. Built nothing. Just sat sometimes on the porch steps of a house that was gone, listening. Because this was the promise, that I would never stop listening. The army sent me letters now and then, consulting offers, invitations to speak, to instruct. I refused them all. They had the knowledge now. Let them teach it their way. All I ever needed was the dirt, the earth, and the pulse beneath it. Sometimes I think of the men I led out of the minefield. The ones who followed step by step because they had nothing left but faith in a woman who knelt. I think of them often. I remember the corporal's frozen face in the glass of the wrecked Humvee. I still whisper his name when the wind is high. And my grandfather, his voice never quite leaves me. The ground will always tell you where it is evil. Just be quiet and listen. I'm still listening. I'll always listen. Because the earth remembers what we forget. And someone must remember with it.